Welcome, everybody, to our brand new Kyle and Nick on Film spinoff, Scary Movie Saturdays.
I love it.
We got a new series running. It may not be every Saturday, but as often as we can, we're going to give you another scary movie film to talk about. Some winners, some losers, and some in between. We're going to start with, I think, what is commonly considered a begrudged classic of the...
It is a classic. We just don't know what it is. Is it a cult classic, bad classic? Is it silly?
Yep. Altered States. And hey, it's an important film because they made fun of it on South Park. So that's how you know it's an absolute winner.
If you parody something, it means you love it, right? We talked about that.
Yeah. So we're going to talk Ken Russell's film Altered States. It's a big push to try and get Warner Brothers to release The Devils on home video. We're going to talk Altered States today. Join us. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoetheFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and thanks again for watching, and thanks again for finding us, and for our loyal fans and viewers, thanks for watching. You can find the show, and you can contact us on Twitter and on Instagram. Check out the Patreon for great options of movies that you want to select for us to do. Today we're going to talk about a cult classic, and I think people kind of forgot about a little bit, Altered States.
Yeah, definitely. So, when psychopathologist Edward Jessup begins experimenting with sensory deprivation tanks, it begins an intense obsession that strains his family life. Fascinated with the search for altered states of consciousness, he starts introducing powerful hallucinogenic drugs, and his handle on reality starts to slip away.
Okay, I want to start off right away. If you go on the Wikipedia page about this movie, it says edited by Stuart Bard. That is not right. Stuart Bard is an associate producer. He went on to direct some other movies like Executive Decision and some other films. And he also did a lot of editing of other movies. But he's not an editor in this film. The editor is called Eric Jenkins. So please, when you do research on movies, check that out. The IMDb is right about this one. Yep. But Stuart Bard is just a producer. He's not the editor of this movie.
Well, commonly, IMDb is always great once a film has been released. Before that, most of it's conjecture. This film has been released now, so that they're usually pretty darn spot on about that. But yeah, I caught a few things in the past episodes where I'm like, why am I going to Wikipedia? I gotta go to IMDb. Edward Jenkins edited Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is pretty much the same movie.
Yeah, that was like his only 2 features, and he went on to do TV. And originally, this movie was supposed to be directed by Arthur Penn. Arthur Penn did Bonnie and Clyde. He's part of the New Hollywood, and I think he's a distant relative of Sean Penn and Chris Penn, the late Chris Penn. But with differences with Patty Chayefsky, Ken Russell was put in, and I think it's the perfect fit. I don't think Arthur Penn would have got it right with a lot of the psychedelic moods and everything over there. I think Ken Russell's the perfect one to go with the silly a little bit.
Yeah, and he's often said that he was the 27th director of this film.
Well, we don't know.
First 26 all pass. These are reported to have directors who passed on the project. Steven Spielberg, Stanley Kubrick, Sidney Pollack, Robert Wise, and Orson Welles all passed on Altered States.
I can tell you why.
Probably the best choice of those.
I can tell you why. Patty Chayefsky.
Yeah.
Now, I love Patty Chayefsky. I do like his work. He does an extensive lot of great writing. One of the things is a lot of the dialogue is exposition heavy. It works great with Network. I don't think it works great in here because all the dialogue, almost 100%, is all exposition.
This dialogue to me feels like, and it's pretty much verbatim out of Chayefsky's book. He wrote the book Altered States as well, which wasn't adapted into this because when he showed it to producing partners, they were like, maybe this should be a book first. So he turned into a book.
I don't get this.
Adapted that, and then we had almost verbatim dialogue, and that caused a rift where Chayefsky actually left production of this film very early on.
Yeah.
He usually gets 100% creative control. Ken Russell stepped in and did not get along with him very well. Let me just be the person who says this because I'm a writer. It's my passion in the world. It's all I care about.
Yeah.
Chayefsky, if you were on a set, you are not in control. We talked about this with the Last Picture Show, which was the buck does not stop with the writer. The writer, Chayefsky, would not be blamed if the movie was garbage. Ken Russell will be blamed if the movie is garbage. Yep. He's the one who has to take the brunt of the pain, but he also gets the brunt of the good when the film works out. I've been on sets before where people are adapting my work, and I always try to purvey a sense of like, it's yours now. I'm just here to help.
I've been the director of my film, and a lot of people have great advice on what you can do with the movie. Mm-hmm. And you can understand. I try not to be as malleable of a director. I try to be firm, but sometimes I do take a lot of suggestions. And I think Patty Chayefsky thought this Ken Russell, I get to be a little more malleable with this guy.
Yeah.
How about this? How about this? And to the final point, just go away.
Yeah, and I think we have to come down to it and say that since Chayefsky had pretty much creative control on network, he was kind of more involved in even
and Final Cut and all that.
Yeah, then we have to compare the two films and showcase that if Altered States looked and felt like Network, which is a great movie, it would not have been a great movie.
No. Not
all films have to have that kind of lens to them. And Chayefsky, I hate to say it, if you want to be the director, be the director.
Yeah.
But this is a case where I think Ken Russell was the right director for the film, and I think Chayefsky needed to step back because
it works.
We needed to have the film that we had, and we needed to have it the way that Ken Russell did. I was reading parts of it where Chayefsky had written what the hallucinations were going to look like, and it's like you're just directing the film at this point.
It's hard.
So
why don't you do storyboards then?
Yeah.
So I still say, after all this, I still think the movie works.
Movie's great.
It's not it gets dirty. I love that when movies aren't afraid to get its hands plunged into filth and get a little mucky at especially in the beginning. It's a little mucky too.
Oh yeah.
It's a little bit metallic and mucky. You almost want to go there with a disinfectant spray and start cleaning up the whole
2020, man, I've been looking at this thing just disgusted.
Right. Yeah. And it just even the intimate sex scenes are it's like, is it a horror movie? Because it doesn't really look all that enticing.
The first sex scene in the film reminded me of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's a scene where one of the characters gets really, really high and they show sex from his perspective, and it's just very guttural and disgusting looking, and there's just this element of I don't want to watch that.
Now, I'm not complaining because it's an effective part of the movie.
Yeah.
There, and it's the space heater, and it looks like it's supposed to be hell in the lighting. So, but it's just, that's the part of the movie that I enjoy. I'm not afraid to get his hands plunged into filth. The other thing like I said, it's all exposition heavy. Mm-hmm. All the dialogue, even when Bob Elliman and William Hurt are in the bedroom and they're talking about his personal getting divorced and everything, it's still just, you're not talking natural. Well, John, you should go to Harvard, all this stuff.
And that was something Russell himself had stated when he was a director, was he was contractually obligated to use the verbatim dialogue. He could not experiment with that dialogue. Even after Chayefsky left the project, he could not change the dialogue. So what he would often do with dialogue he felt was worthless was he would have the characters mumble or do it while they're eating or drinking, so that the audience doesn't care about that line of dialogue that can basically get excised from the film, but they're doing it while they're eating. So it's still in there. Legally, I'm still good, but it's not important dialogue to the film. And I think this has a tight runtime. It's an hour, 40 minutes. I didn't expect it to be any shorter. I thought it might be a lot longer than that before I popped it in.
When you start the beginning of the movie, you're like, wow, I'm here. I'm going to make an investment for almost a 2-hour movie because it's really long. It's really a long intro.
Yeah, the introduction of the film, it's setting up, but it sets its pieces in play. It's like a big chessboard. It sets up exactly where these limited characters are going to be, but it maneuvers them around and starts placing them into situations.
I do like the beginning of the movie because it's the tank, it's centered, and then the camera just slowly goes back and back and back and back till you see the whole what's going on. There's no really any dialogue. You just get a little bit of sound and then a musical score. But then you get a shot of what it looks like inside, just a few seconds. Yeah. So it's not really just occupies the entire time of the event of slow tracking. It's great filmmaking.
It sets it up. It also creates a good mood for the opening of the film. And again, I like a good set of opening credits, and then we flash right in, and I understood kind of how I should feel watching this movie.
Right.
Within the opening sequence that takes place, which is good because if you didn't translate everything we're supposed to feel as an audience at that point, you're going to lose us with that 7-year time jump. Because that 7-year time jump is early in the movie, where I was like, wait, hold up, we're jumping already. And I didn't realize that those opening couple scenes do matter as the film goes on, but they don't feel like they do during that 7-year time jump. You're like, okay, well, we can excise that, but it's important to the characters. So.
And it's important that William Hurt keeps his clothes off for the Body Heat and this movie, his first two movies.
And keeps busy.
So, like I said, Arthur Penn was really supposed to be the director of this movie, and of course, Arthur Penn is really good at discovering new talent, especially with Bonnie Clyde. He discovered Gene Wilder and Gene Hackman, as well as Faye Dunaway, and here he discovered William Hurt and Blair Brown, who worked really well. I don't think he actually worked with them before he got fired, so these are not Ken Russell hires. Mm-hmm. And you can see William Hurt's pretty good. He's pretty impressive in this.
Yeah,
and he carries the movie.
To catch those early on people. I mentioned to you before the show started. I saw Blair Brown in the movie, and I was like, no, because I'm most familiar with her in the 2000s. She had that TV show Fringe, which actually had a sleep deprivation tank in it.
Right, yeah.
Like,
it's almost like this is our audition tape.
Yeah, like it was almost like that first episode of the show is all that, and she appears in the show, and I didn't even put that together. Watching the film, I was like, there's no way that's Blair Brown, because I'm just most familiar with her in 2000s. She's so engaging in the film, and she's got this, like when he sees her in that kind of heavenly visage, we see that. She's got a very innocent quality to her, even though she's a character we see naked several times throughout the film. Usually, when you see someone naked, you've seen them at their most vulnerable,
right? Yeah.
But we don't always see them as innocent because of what they're doing. So, I'm actually surprised that she was able to be viewed in an innocent way throughout the entire film.
And it's interesting for it being an early '80s film that she's not just a vessel or a receptacle. She actually is an intelligent character.
She's an intelligent character, and again, someone clocked in the time. They said that she spends like a third of the movie naked. That could be something where she could be perceived then as just like a visual stimuli or something like that. But she's a very strong character. She is kind of, you might, as you say, would she be our barometer character?
She could be, right. When she gets nervous, she gets scared. Yes, I would say it's my thing.
That's your thing. I stole it.
Character. But also, right, because I don't think Patty Chayefsky's really investing what this movie can be about. This is actually more about addiction. About something, you're constantly going after the well, and you're going to get, it's dangerous, playing around. But this is actually more, I think, addiction than they really wanted to write it about. He wanted to write it just a surreal movie about philosophy of psychology and everything. But I think you really could dive deeper into this, that it's a compulsion that he's having, and he's not doing it scientifically. He just wants to do it to do it.
Well, and the film is partly inspired by, I think it's John C. Lilly's work, who was a dolphin trainer and had done some pathopsychology kind of stuff.
And senses deprivation.
Yeah, and so you can kind of see where that inspiration comes from. But yeah, the film feels very much addiction based. It's not something I immediately connected to it, but the strive to do what we want, what we want with our lives, that takes on. The film actually was originally, in some ways, a Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, going all the way back to the first meetings that Chayefsky had with Bob Fosse and Herb Grandner. Those
are some good friends, right there.
Yeah, they wanted to do a project together. They talked about doing a new version of Frankenstein, doing a new version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it kind of morphed into this. There is a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde-ness to the film as well.
That's funny because Bob Fosse is a dancer, and they did a Frankenstein movie with Frankenstein doing a dance number, and that's Young Frankenstein. So
all part of it.
But right, I can see elements of Frankenstein, of Jekyll and Hyde, of you can be a good person and you go bad, and reverses and everything. So yes, I can see a lot of the themes and tones, but you can delve deep. This is, I think, especially when sleep deprivation was a lot of LSD and drug inducing, that this is actually kind of a metaphor of addiction and obsessions, that it's going to corrupt your whole family and corrupt everybody around you.
Yeah, and see, I saw more prevalent was the idea of kind of a mental illness factor to it, where that he is damaging himself in this search, and that we kind of see the regression part, losing somebody that's close to you, having them kind of disappear before your eyes and regress to another form. So again, that's why I referencing I was connecting to Blair Brown's character. I was watching him through her eyes as much as I could, and even through Bob Balaban's eyes too. Watching someone you care about,
he's more the moral center of this. Yeah, he's the more conscious, and I call it conscientious character. It's almost like a character understands, he knows he's in the story, and Bob Balaban's character is almost like that. The other doctor, the doctor who doesn't believe anything William Hurt says, whether the guy
Mason Parrish.
Mason Parrish. My God, if they did a remake, Rhys Darby would have been that character. He would have been perfect for that role. He's almost doing Rhys Darby in this movie. Because I was like, is that Rhys Darby? Did he just get reincarnated? It looks like him a little.
If your entire job is to yell as much as you can,
I don't believe a word in that.
And there's that kind of rift too, is that Chayefsky didn't want to have animated kind of characters. He wanted all the dialogue to be more muted and discussion based. But again, that feels like it's a Discovery Channel documentary kind of thing then, where it's Ken Russell, he's a ramp it up to 11 kind of guy. Yes. If you watch Tommy, the movie is practically all yelling and bombastic singing. There's nothing that's muted in Tommy, and there's nothing that's really muted in this film as much as it can be.
No. Cinematography is Jordan S. I can't say I love him, but
Cronenworth,
yes,
it's our boy.
Yes, before Blade Runner and before Buckaroo Banzai, this is the movie he did. Now you can see a little bit elements of Blade Runner in this movie. A lot of dark and really singular, like in the beginning of the movie, like the whole even the tank is metallic and brown, but the light source is inside the tank and it's blue. But he's not afraid to get dirty and mucky. This is it's a lot of things of cinematography that that's a clever shot, but it gets pulled away especially when you do the surreal elements, where it gets really the surrealism of stuff that it gets kind of taken away. But there's great talent in the cinematography of this movie.
Yeah, and being able to capture so many different elements, because you play with a level of unreality, having the regression portion of Eddie's kind of life where he's turning back into something primordial. You have to be able to play with, is that actually how he looks, or is that just how he perceives himself to look?
Very much like 1930s horror movie, that whole sequence.
Again, the universal monster thing kept coming into my mind, like the Frankensteins and the Dr. Jekylls, and like it felt like kind of, that iconic scene in The Wolfman where you see him transform before your eyes because of the ability to like just fade in of different screens. It's a simplistic change, but that's kind of what worked well. And then it's also a film that uses those techniques, but then plays off of like heavy movement forward in the world of CGI with its finale. Like that was some of the first computer-generated effects that were in a film seen in the finale of this movie. And it's like we get to capture classic horror tropes.
Exactly, yes.
And also provide something new. And I think we can't underestimate that.
No, right. And of course, the most famous imagery is the goat. It's like, what in the world is that? Because that is stuck in that etched in my brain when I saw that a little too early as a kid, that imagery. And I think even the cover, the original cover, the VH cover, had that image of the goat on there, which if you saw it at the video store as a kid, like, what?
Real quick, check out GoFilmMovies.com.
Good plug.
But so I really like the imagery to it. I like that it played with, and again, like having different worlds. What this film looked like to me? It looked like Poltergeist. It looked like a science version of Poltergeist. It's coming out in pretty similar time periods, but they also have, and even like the Poltergeist sequels where they kind of leave the suburban kind of world and see some other things going on. That kind of had that visual flair for me that was on display here.
And I think it's effective because when everything is not really, when you have like just human dialogue and people have people's houses and you're walking down the street, it seems very on location. Of course, it's on location, real natural environments and everything, but then you pull away with somewhere like a lot of surrealism. And you're like, whoa, that makes it pop because it almost grounds it a little bit. Like Poltergeist, there's a lot of things that grounds it. The family being family and everything. Almost like we're almost eavesdropping on them, and then we get the sci-fi, the fantasy, and all that stuff, and the horror, and that elevates it, that enhances it. Yeah.
So I was impressed with that. This is my first time watching the movie, so when I watched it, I was thinking, gosh, they better get weird. Like, you have to get a little weird when you do this.
It does, doesn't it?
And I was happy for those moments because I like when the weirdness has a purpose. I'm kind of critical when a movie gets weird
just
and
to
doesn't
be weird.
have a purpose. When they do it just to kind of like, ooh, check out how weird we can be with our editing. This film, I like that even though the dream sequence kind of stuff and the visions that he gets kind of have this, going back to our monster metaphor, they kind of have a Hammer horror feel to them.
They do.
Like where they've got this 50s and 60s kind of cheap looking, but also
not
just
really
out
bloody
there enough to kind of bother you. There's an unnerving quality to them that I can't quite state.
Shower after watching this. And I love the metaphor of them slowly turning into dust. A great metaphor of because Patty's trying to invest what are human beings. Are we evolving to energy? Are we coming from primordial beings? And where are we in placement? Or are we just going back to being dust? So it's a play, of course, that in there, and it takes a long time, that process. They hold that for quite a while. And it's actually pretty impressive. I don't know how they did it. Yeah, it looks like clay or whatever, but
there was something about that where it's like, again, that's disturbing stuff, and that comes into another thought that I have with the film was that Chayefsky's script kind of warns you as we begin to look for those outer reaches of our world, like as we begin to try to tackle what comes before we're born, what comes after we die, we may not always be happy with what we find out. Yeah, and that kind of comes into play with Jessup's search for the truth that will not always bring you happiness in your world. I mean, we forget that this starts as a love story, it kind of ends as a love story, and in between us all this creepy, weird stuff.
Now, if you check the movie at the 56-minute, 43-second mark, you can hear in the airport somebody paging Mr. Daniel Craig. So be careful. If you turn up the volume at the 56-minute, 43-second, you can at the airport, you can hear, Daniel Craig, please come to the front. It's like, hey!
The funny thing, a remake, take the hint, Hollywood.
I watched this movie right after I watched it on another time watching No Time for Die trailer, and I watched that, and then I watched this movie, and it was like, clever mark. But, Jessup, Blair Blount says it perfectly, because there's a lot of exposition. You are a weird, fascinating bastard, and he does not stray away from that from the entire movie.
I hope that was his character's log.
But I don't think he changes. I don't think his character has any evolutionary change. I think he pretty much stays the same. Obviously, he changes physically. Obviously, he gets morality, but I don't think there's a change to him. I don't know if he stops his addiction at the end, or there's a resolution to.
I feel like he does. I feel like there's, I think there's that powerful scene near the end of the film before the climax, if you will, where he's coming to terms with
consequences.
The consequences of his search and of his obsession. He has discovered now too much. He's seen too much, where he's starting to question, like, was learning these answers worth it?
Right.
And I think he starts to see then that in the process of losing his family, he's starting to regret.
I'm not going to give too much, but I think that ending doesn't have a complete closure. So
no,
you can go
not.
either way.
It's a film where you can see him either changing or not changing. Yeah. I'm a bit more hopeful of it. I'd like to think that there was at least an element of wanting to change. But again, like with all addiction,
for me, I think it's an element.
Try and quit more often, you know.
I think for me, it's a little more like, all right, I went a little too far. I'll keep doing it, but maybe not too much. You know, I won't do so much cocaine next time. I'll just do a little bit. You know.
It wouldn't be Scary Movie Saturday without some existential dread.
And I think that's the point of the end of the movie is you have that point of view, which you can see in the movie, and then I have my point of view, which I love great debate on it. I love endings that you can always argue with.
Yeah. So that comes in with you guys too. Let us know down in the comments what you thought about the ending. Do you side with Team Kyle? Or do you side with
because he's the
Team
goat, right? He's the goat.
I mean, we're talking to a literal goat.
Sacrifice goat in the movie.
Might check my third eye for it. I don't know. I think I see the answer. But let us know in the comment section down below what you thought about Altered States. We both were inherently fascinated by the film. We'll probably
it's a silly, fun movie, I think. And it's, like I said, when I critique movies, are they memorable and unforgettable? And this is memorable. There are some memorable good movies, but it's completely unforgettable.
Yep.
You will not forget that you've seen this movie.
And I would also say too, it's entertaining. Like, there's some people who think that, like, if a film has all these different elements to it, but it's not as entertaining, that it's okay. And it's like, that's fine. But like, if you want to get my butt in the seat to keep talking about something, you still have to entertain me. I'm a viewer. I'm still there for 2 hours, and you got to keep me busy. You're my babysitter. So that's what I was kind of impressed with the film, is I was still entertained while asking all these wacky, weird questions, including like, hey, how the heck did Drew Barrymore pop up in this film in her first act?
You got to be careful, right? She's in there, not she's in it. You gotta maybe recognize her.
There's your trilogy, Altered
Before
States, Firestarter, and then or E.T. and then Firestarter. We've got a trilogy. Maybe throw in Cat's Eye while you're at it.
That great photograph of her lighting Stephen King's cigarette.
There you go.
I love that picture.
It's fantastic. We'll do that one maybe some other time too. But you can let us know about that by joining the Patreon down in the description, telling us what you want us to talk about in future episodes. Yep. And like Nick pointed out at the beginning of the episode, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing. Everybody on YouTube asks to do those things, but it does really help the channel when you do. You have no idea how much it influences our ability to continue doing what we're doing and to continue bringing you more and more content and some great episodes like the show, our flagship show, and like Scary Movie Saturday. So think about that, and then check out the Patreon down below. Tiers start as low as $1. And until next time, you can find all my film reviews on GoFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast.
We'll see you next Scary Movie Saturday.
Keep watching weird crap.